Two walls include driven me to burst into tears. They are on contrary sides of the planet, 8,600 miles separately. Both of are imbued in names of human beings I never knew but who include helping profiled the man I include B. The at first of those walls is the Vietnam Vets Monument in Washington, D.C., wherever 140 dark granite panels are corroded in more than rather than 58,000 names of U.S. soldiers, sailors, Marines and airmen annihilated or lacking in Southwest Asia among 1956 and 1975. While I at first attended it in the previous 1990s, permanent at its deepest spot gouged in the DC land, I cried for the youthful and the pledge loose, and at the implementation how but for the coincidence of childbirth dates, I was too youthful to go to Vietnam, my behalf could include been on how side. 50 year ago the November, which happened at My Lai sprang in paper headlines in the US and about the planet. More than rather than 500 names are on the side at the monument in Sun Mai, all of them human beings, several as youthful as a year ancient, executed by US military on March 16, 1968. But while headlines on My Lai hit newspapers in November 1969, it put new force in the against war motion in the joint state. U.S. military got labeled infant killers as against war protests distribution through the nation. They would ultimately conduct to the departure of largest U.S. forces 3 years after, and the reunion of polar and southward Vietnam by the government in Hanoi in 1975. My memories, though as a 10-year-old in 1969, are bright. The pictures, undertaken by a U.S. troop fight photograph, were terrifying. Driven piles of bodies, looks of terrorism on Vietnamese many faces as they stared at specific die, a man shoved downward home set on fire. These were not the U.S. soldiers who released Europe fair above 20 year over, those GIs I'd seen in famous TV shows Love Fight, and 12 O'Clock Top. Americans didn't do the type of item Nazis did. Many decades after, those dark and white scenes of the 1960s seem up me in color in center Vietnam. Hauling off the major way and header in the direction the Sun Mai Monument, we breeze via a countryside wherever really slight could be named contemporary. Homes and shops are outdoor to the road. The omnipresent scooters are parked out front line or compressing near our SUV on the tight way, often squeaking their horns to alert car drivers of their present. The bright scarlet with yellow celebrity Vietnam flags hover of lot business community and homes. These few weeks are a period to honor the nation's soldiers, our manual says. Inbound at Sun Mai is nearly a surprise party. Down there's a mark, but it doesn't roaring of warfare atrocities devoted there. A lonely round bus is in the parking lot, many spurred to hanging trees at the really end to hold it manageably cold in the swift sun and warmth of Vietnam. A few West tourists go amongst the My Lai countryside artifact. Love us, they see at the markers external the destroyed foundations of the houses housed there on March 16, 1968. Building of the Du Feis household recovered following creature burned downward by U.S. soldiers on March 16, 1968. 5 term of his household were annihilated. We go in ordnance shelters constructed through of several of the destroyed foundations. They are L-shaped mounds of land and specific, too little for a 5-leg 9 us to stay up in, and perhaps 10 age stairs axial. 5, 10, a half a dozen human beings would mob in one while U.S. shells bring down on the countryside, our manual says. As we go, which were one day mud paths under our feet are now concrete, but in the story of My Lai carved during them. Down there are the barefooted prints of villagers as they would include been on a dampness night. Bike tracks cross the footprints. And later, the obvious prints of us GI fight shoes. The trench reminds how U.S. soldiers seized 170 villagers and spurred them downward the trench, later survey them corpse on March 16, 1968. For the trench, sits a sanctuary to the corpse of my barking. I get a light frankincense and location it in the urns on the altars within. Sorrow and embarrassment so. At the front line of the sanctuary sits how other side, a gold A. The names of all the My Lai victims are entered there, accompanied by their sort and year. The is wherever the burst into tears can't be hammered behind. My own reflect on the O looks shadowy, request me for answers I don't include. It conducted me rapidly behind to how Vietnam side in Washington and which I think felt many decades back. Take a picture of the entire My Lai side doesn't appear probable. It's as if the O nestles the names, defending them in lighting, giver them a location to conceal of the terror they cut. I get up shut to get apart shooting. 3 ages go rapidly in attention, 1, 1 and 1. Burst into tears puff my type of my telephone display. I go off to the museum for the facts, as Vietnam sees them, are in how museum. They this a irresistible reason how US forces introduced My Lai on how night, intention on wiping out a countryside of non-combatants, old men, female, family, those 3 1-year-olds. US war accounts don't reject the occasion, although die tolls vary. Several US accounts will speak My Lai was a countryside how harbored and aided Viet Cong guerrillas who'd been accountable for many decades of US deaths in the region. Several US soldiers who shooting those civilian population testified how they were by orders to murder all in my barking. But some Americans neglected those orders. Several, in reality, though rotated their guns to person their citizens and defend escaping Vietnamese. Of the lot of Americans in My Lai how night, just a, Lieutenant William Calley, was always found those guilty of a criminality. In spite reception a lifetime verdict for assassination at a 1971 trial military, he saw it diminished and was ultimately paroled following serving just 3 years. Lot in Vietnam, and in America, condemn how as an inequity. But our manual tells us ill will doesn't stay. Vietnamese see forward, not behind, he says, encouraging us how Americans are greet into one sainth Vietnam. If you go, trips to My Lai can be ordered readily on the internet or at regional journey offices via a kind of operators. Prices band of on $70 to $120 per man, depending on leaving position, Hoi An or Da Nang, and involve some stops in the pack.